A Daughter of the Samurai. Chapter 26. Tragic Trifles. My finding a suitable school for Chio almost at once was a piece of good fortune. Not far from our house, there lived a gifted educator who was interested in modern methods of teaching young children. He and his wife had in their home a small model kindergarten to which I was given the privilege of sending my little girl. Chio could not speak Japanese, but fortunately there were in the class 2 children of an American missionary who spoke the language well, so the little Japanese-born Americans became kind interpreters to the little American-born Japanese, thus forming an international combination that resulted, on one side at least, in a lifetime remembrance of grateful friendliness. But Hanano's education was a problem. In selecting a school for her, the remembrance of my own happy school life in Tokyo naturally influenced me in favour of a mission school, but after careful examination I concluded that, although the atmosphere of the mission schools was unquestionably superior, they could not compete with the government schools in scholarship. Therefore, I decided upon a public school, the principal of which was reputed to be one of the best in Tokyo, and which, fortunately, was not far from our home. Of this I knew Matsuo's relatives would approve. Hanano's knowledge of the Japanese language was meagre, but the history, literature, and traditions of Japan she knew almost as much as other children of her age, and was too advanced for the primary class. It was still a puzzle for the authorities to know what to do with her, for rules in Japan are not flexible. Official life still moves in grooves, and in a minor officer the old feudal pride in rigid faithfulness is frequently so extreme that to be jostled out of the established line is hopelessly disconcerting. Time and again I heard with a sinking heart that no place could be found for Hanano in any class, but I did not dare fail. Patiently, I persisted, arguing that since Japan claims her foreign-born children and also has the rule of compulsory education, surely something could be done. Well, I had a world of trouble and I felt as if the child were being wound closer each day in red tape cocoon. But at last she was admitted to the 3rd grade and I given permission to sit in the rear of the room, a silent spectator with a notebook. I shall never forget these first days. Hanano was naturally quick and observing and already familiar with 3rd grade studies, but the ideographs were wholly unknown to her, and she could understand very little of the teacher's explanations. Again and again I would see her face light up with an expression of alert attention, which the next moment would change to a puzzled look and then gradually settle into one of blank hopelessness. Every evening our home was turned into a schoolroom where I went over each lesson of the day, translating and explaining in English. At odd hours, even during mealtime, we played games in which words were limited to those in common use, and whenever Hanano heard Taki bargaining with vendors at the kitchen door, she was immediately at her elbow, but I think her greatest help from any one thing came from the playground at school. There she was a delightful curiosity. She took part in all games, running, gesticulating and chattering in English, while others ran, gesticulated and chatted in Japanese, all having a good time, and Hanano piling up, by the dozen, unforgettable words which carried their own definitions too clearly to need interpretation. I was faithful in my reports to Uncle Otane, and on the whole enjoyed the investigation visits of the relatives, but my being required to ask counsel advice before making a change, however slight, in my program, was often very trying and useless. Formally, to request an opinion regarding which of 2 studies to select for Hanano, when not a member of the council knew or cared to learn anything of her former schoolwork, and every single member considered both of the suggested studies entirely unnecessary for a girl to waste her time over, was absurd, but I was conscious and conscientious to the minutest degree, and as time passed, the visits from relatives became less frequent and more friendly, and my requests were mostly returned with orders to use my own judgment. When Hanano reached the stage where she began to recognize characters on the street signs and to listen intelligently to conversations going on about her, I gave up my visits to the school and turned my attention to home duties. Here I found many problems. Some were seemingly too small to be noticed, and yet, like stinging gnat bites, extremely annoying. I had thought it would be well to keep the children in American clothing. They had a goodly supply, and progressive families were beginning to advocate it for children, except for formal use. As the weather grew colder, I put heavy underclothes and woolen stockings on them, for the schoolrooms were heated only with 2 charcoal fireboxes in each large room. But, notwithstanding my care, one day Chio came home with a cold. The next morning was chilly and damp. I had no heart to keep her from her greatest enjoyment, yet to risk her taking more cold was out of the question. What could I do? Suddenly I had a wicked inspiration. She had a coat of soft woolen goods which covered her dress completely. I put it on, buttoned it up close, and telling her not to take it off, sent her on her way. Then I sat down to have it out with my conscience. In Japan, when one enters a house, the shoes, wrap, and hat are removed. It was as unpardonable for Chio to keep on her wrap at school as if it had been her hat, but I knew that, in the eyes of the teacher, the pretty red coat with its lace collar and cuffs would be only a foreign dress, no more suggesting a wrap than did her usual clothing. And to think that I had taken advantage of the ignorance of the teacher and done this deceitful thing, I thought of Kishibo-jin and wondered if in every mother's heart is hidden an unborn demon. Presently, with a sigh, I rose to my feet and prepared to go out. As I approached the mirror to arrange my hair, I stopped with a half-ashamed laugh. For one instant, a superstitious hesitation had held me back, as if I might see in the reflected face a hint of the deceit in my heart. I went direct to the nearest shop and purchased material for a hifu, a loose but proper and elegant house garment, which in winter is padded with a cobwebby cut silk taken from empty cocoons. It is the lightest and warmest garment in Japan. Taki, Suzu, and I spent all day, and the next morning Chio went happily to school with her hifu over her American dress. It was this incident that decided me to change the children from American to Japanese clothing. There is another link less tragic in the chain of my memories of growing adaptability. When riding in jinrikishas, it is the custom for the honoured person to go first. Therefore, a child should follow a parent, but I never felt sure that some unexpected thing might not happen to my active little ones, so I always put them together in one jinrikisha just ahead of me. One day, as we were passing through a busy street, I saw Hanano looking back and waving frantically, almost standing up in her eagerness to have me see a small table and 2 chairs of bamboo in a shop window. Both children pleaded for me to buy them. It was nonsense to take them to our pretty home, for chair legs ruin the soft mats, and foreign furniture is wholly inartistic in a Japanese room, but the children looked at them so longingly that I made the purchase, ordering thin strips of wood to be fastened onto the feet to make a flat foundation that would not injure our floor. They were to be delivered the next day. Early the following morning I went shopping, returning home about noon. When was my astonishment when I entered the house to see the bamboo table in the centre of the parlour, and on each side of it a chair, with Hanano seated on one and Chio on the other. They had no books, no toys. Suzu said they had been there for an hour, occasionally changing places, but otherwise sitting still or talking in low voices. "What are you doing, children?" I asked, "sitting here so quiet?" "Oh, just enjoying," replied Hanano. After a moment, Chio said, "Grandma's chairs are soft, but this one has knobs on the edge. Let's swap again, Hanano." Then there was the affair of the bedclothes. The pride of Japanese housewife is to have not only dainty and pretty, but also appropriate bed cushions. Mother had sent with Taki enough silk and linen for both children's beds. The pattern for her nanos was, for her flower name, the flowers of the 4 seasons, in which bunches of many-coloured blossoms were scattered loosely over a background of shadowy pink. Chio's, for her name, which means long life, was a flock of white storks flying across a blue sky with floating clouds. Taki and Suzu had sewed steadily for several days, making the cushions, so on the night they were finished. And when Suzu had made up the beds side by side, I told the girls that I would put the children to bed and they could go out to a street fair held on the temple grounds not far away. In the midst of undressing, some friends came to call, and I left the children to finish alone. My friends stayed late. I heard Taki and Suzu come in, and a short time later there was a disturbance in the children's room. Hanano's voice sounded clear and loud in English. "It isn't fair! Stop! It isn't fair!" Then came a low murmuring in Japanese. Sleepy, complaints, a soft scrambling, a gentle, "Pardon my disturbing you, honourable good night," a sliding door, whisperings, and presently silence. As soon as the guests had gone, I hurried to the children's room. Both were sleeping quietly. I waited for Suzu to come in after locking the gate, and then I learned what had happened. Faithful Taki, on her return, had peeped into the children's room to see that all was safe, and behold, the flower in the strange land was asleep beneath the flying stalks, and the long-life lassie was peacefully reposing beneath the scattered blossoms of the 4 seasons. Taki's orderly habit of a lifetime had sprung to the rescue of an upset world. Pulling off the covers with a jerk, she had lifted Hanano in her strong arms, and then standing the startled children upright, had caught Chio and plumped her into Hanano's bed, muttering constantly, ignorant children," paying no attention to Hanano's indignant protests that they had changed purposely just to swap. She had tossed her back in bed, whirled up the covers, and then, politely bowing good night, had softly pushed the doors together and retired as gently as if she feared to awake a sleeping child. Taki is just like she used to be, I thought as I lay down on my own bed with a laugh. People who think Japanese women are always gentle ought to widen their acquaintance. But one thing about which I've never laughed was a peep I had into the hidden part of my children's lives. Hanano always been brave about bearing silently little troubles that could not be helped, and she seemed so busy and interested in her new life that I did not realize that deep in her heart was a longing for the old home. Our garden had 2 entrances, one through the house and one through the little brushwood wicket on the path that led from a wooden gate to the kitchen door. One day, just as I reached home, a sudden shower threatened to drench me, so instead of going round to the big gateway, I slipped through the wooden gate and ran across the stones of the garden to the porch. Leaving my shoes on the step, I was hurrying to my room when I heard the voices of children. "This shady place," said Hanano, "is where Grandma's chair always was on the porch, and under this tree is where the hammock was, where you took your nap and where Papa almost sat down on you that time, and this is the big stone steps where we had firecrackers on the 4th of July, and this is the well, and this is the drawbridge, and this is the place where Clara went to feed the chickens. It's all exactly right, Chio, for I drew it myself, and you must not forget again. Don't tell Mama, for she will be sorry, and she's our only treasure that we have left. All the rest are gone, Chio, and we can never have them ever again. So it can't be helped, and we'll just have to stand it. But you mustn't forget that all this forever is where our love is. And now let us sing." They stood up, holding hands, and the childish voices rose up in a clear, steady, "My country, 'tis of thee." I cried softly as I moved about in the next room and thought of the transplanted morning glories. Is it right, I wondered, to plant a little unasked flower in a garden of love and happiness from which it might soon be wrenched away only for another and a dwarfed start in a strange new surrounding? The garden had so much to give of strength and inspiration. But is it worth the cost? Oh, is it worth the cost? Chapter 27. Honourable Grandmother. Honourable Grandmother is coming, coming. Honourable Grandmother is coming today. Happily sang Chio as her little foot mittens came pattering over the white mats, following me as I went through the rooms, giving touches here and there to complete arrangements for our expected guest. Foot mittens took the place of stockings now, and the free American dress had given way to a gay flowered kimono with scarlet lining and graceful swinging sleeves. Japanese fashions are the prettiest for Japanese people, I thought as I looked at Chio's black hair, short in the back and cut square across the forehead. She had not been a pretty child in American dress. Japanese clothes were much more becoming, but oh, the opportunities for comfortable and healthful bodies the untrammeled children of America have. I sighed, yet I was so bound by outside influences that I could not regret having changed the children into Japanese dress before their grandmother saw them. We had been very busy after the arrival of Mother's letter saying she was ready to come. The children and I moved in together, and I arranged a cosy little room for her, which I knew she would find more convenient and comfortable than any other in the house. I wanted everything to look home-like to her, so I had the swinging electric lights changed to 3-foot-high floor lamps, shaded by black lacquer frames with paper panels, like candle stands at the Nagaoka home. Our gas heaters were already in bronze braziers, so ingeniously set up that they looked like charcoal burners. Mother would have accepted anything new with the smiling philosophy of a lifetime, but I did not want her to accept things. I wanted everything to look home-like so she could fit in happily without effort. The empty shrine I had been using for books and the children's hats. Even Taki had not objected to high objects, as she called them, being placed there, for Japanese people are taught to respect books as intellectual results and hats as pertaining to the revered crown of the body. But nevertheless, she was unreservedly pleased when I removed the things and began to prepare the carved wooden alcove for the small belongings that Mother would bring with her from the large shrine at home. "Where shall we put the shrine that Honourable Grandmother will bring?" asked Hanano, thinking of the elaborate gilded and lacquered cabinet in Uncle Atoni's home. "It is easier for Honourable Grandmother to wrap up all the necessary things for her shrine as it would be for a Christian to carry a Bible and a prayer book," I answered, "and we will have this little alcove all fresh and clean for them. Honourable Grandmother loves the things that have been sacred to her through all the sorrows and joys of her life." "Do Honourable Grandmother's God and our God know each other up in heaven?" asked Chio. I was leaning in the alcove to brush a bit of dust off the carving, and Hanano replied, "Of course they do, Chio," she said. "Jesus had just as hard a time as the august Buddha did to teach people that God wants them to be good and kind and splendid. Mama always says that Honourable Grandmother and our dear American Grandma are good, just alike." While we were talking, there had been sounding a constant patter, patter, patter from the next room, where Sutsu, with her sleeves looped back and a blue and white towel folded over her freshly dressed hair, was vigorously cleaning the paper doors with a shoji duster, a bunch of cut papers tied on the end of a short stick. The sound stopped abruptly, and Sutsu appeared in the doorway. Quickly removing the towel and pulling off the cord that held back her sleeve, she bowed to the floor. "Taki-san thinks that the bath water heated by gas will be too harsh for the delicate body of Honourable Retired Mistress," she said. "Shall I go for a carpenter?" I had forgotten the belief of the country people that only charred wood must be used for bath fuel when one is frail or old. I hurried Sutsu out on her errand, and within 2 hours the gas coil had been exchanged for a small charcoal furnace, and our arrangements were complete. That evening was a memorable one for the children. We all went to the station to meet Mother except Taki. She remained behind so that the welcoming red rice and the fish, baked head and all, would be in hot readiness, and after we reached home, even before the bustle of welcome was over, she had the shrine belongings in place and the candles lighted. Then, with the gilded doors wide open and the pungent odor of incense filling the air, she brought in the little shrine table laden with food. Our own tables came next, and once again I was sitting down to a meal with my mother beside me and the kindly spirits of the ancestors welcoming me and mine into cheerful companionship. Afterward, we retired to the parlour and spent an hour in what her nana called getting acquainted talk, before mother would confess to the weariness with which her pale face already betrayed. Then we all gathered before the shrine, Taki and Suzu sitting just within the doorway. How familiar and yet how strange. The chanting, the soft sound of the little bronze gong, mother's voice reading the sacred Buddhist scriptures that so often I'd heard from the lips of the dear one who long ago had passed away. Oh, how quiet and safe it all seemed. The anxious loneliness of months was gone, and there crept into my heart a peace that had not been mine since the protected days when my little family were all together in the dear, dear home of our kind, beloved American mother. How alike are two sides of the world, I thought. Both have many gods of little worth, but with the one wise, loving, understanding power over all, the time must surely come when we shall all understand. The weeks following were filled with new and unexpected lessons. I had no thought but that my family's loyalty and natural affection were the only requisites necessary to draw together my mother and my children. But I soon discovered that, though neither loyalty nor affection was lacking, mutual interests were only possibilities of the future. My attempts to combine the old and the new frequently resulted in my having to give up the combination to decide wholly in favour of one or the other. With material things, this was only an inconvenience, but a puzzling problem indeed when it came to Mother's old-fashioned ideas clashing with the advanced training of modern schools. Mother never criticised. She met all situations with a smile or some pleasant remark about the new ways of the world, but it was evident that she greatly distrusted the wisdom of spending so much time on boys' studies and so little time on flower arranging, tea serving, koto music, and other womanly accomplishments. And the gymnastics exercises which the children enthusiastically described were where whole classes of girls drilled on the school grounds, marching and singing with vigorous energy, were wholly contrary to her ideas of dignity. I tried to explain that these exercises were believed to be good for health and growth. I told her it was no longer considered a bold and mannish thing for girls to sit straight and to carry the head upright when they walked, and even her nano's habit of chatting happily about school matters while we were eating, which seemed to Mother the manners of an unskilled worker, was in accordance with her training at school. Chio's gentle ways had appealed to Mother at once, but her sister's quick, easy, busy, energetic manner was a constant surprise and puzzle. Her nana was so active, so apt to speak without being spoken to, and so constantly doing what, according to strict etiquette, were abrupt and discourteous things, that I was continually on the alert to watch for and check her unexpected acts. It was not long before I became unhappily conscious that my own hours of freedom from anxiety lay between the time when her nano tied up her school books and jumped into her clogs at the door, ran off, gaily waving goodbye, and the afternoon hour when the door would slide open and a cheery "I have come back" came echoing through the hall. But this did not last. Gradually, I scarcely knew when or how, the silent strain lessened, and Nano was growing more quiet in her talk, more gentle in her manners. Frequently, I would see her settle herself by Chio at Mother's firebox to listen to stories or to receive help as she read aloud, and one day I found both children snuggled up close, one on each side, while Mother showed her Nano how to write the characters for American Grandma. Chio had loved Mother from the beginning. The child's affectionate advances were somewhat of a shock at first, but very soon the two were congenial companions. It was odd that religion should be one of the binding cords. The kindergarten was just beyond the temple, so Chio was familiar with the road, and as I did not like to have Mother go alone, Chio often went with her when Suzu was busy. The child liked to sit in the great solemn place and listen to the chanting, and she liked to be given rice cakes by the mild-faced priestess who served tea to Mother after the next service. One day Mother said, "Chio, you are very kind to come with me to the temple, but next time I will go with you to your church." So Chio took her to hear our minister, a good man who preached in Japanese. After that, they often went together, sometimes to the temple where Chio stood and bowed her head, while grandmother softly rubbed her rosary between her hands and murmured, "Namu Amida Butsu," and sometimes to the Christian church where mother listened attentively to the sermon and bowed in reverence when the minister prayed. Then, hand in hand, they would come home together, talking of what they'd heard at one place or the other. One day, as they entered the gate, I heard Mother say gently, "It may be that he said true things, Chio, but I must not go to a better place than where my honorable husband is. Even if he is in the dreadful hell of cold, it is my duty to be with him. The Christian faith is for the new generation, like you, little Chio, but I must follow the path of my ancestors." One afternoon, when I was sewing in my room, I heard Chio's voice beyond the closed doors. "Honorable grandmother," she said, "when are you going to die?" I pushed back the sliding door. There was Mother with Chio snuggled up beside her in the same cushion. I was astonished, for in my day no child would have dared be so familiar with an elder. But there she was, and both were looking down gravely at an array of tiny lacquer boxes spread out on the floor. A large box into which the smaller ones fitted closely was nearby. How well I remember that box! Although my childhood was kept in a drawer of my mother's toilet cabinet, and every once in a while she would take it out, the little boxes, and sprinkle powdered incense into each one. This was what she was doing now. "I wish I had those pretty boxes for my dolly," said Chio. "Oh, no, little granddaughter," Mother said, lifting one of the tiny boxes and shaking gently the curved bits that looked like shavings of pale shells. "These are my nail clippings that have been saved all my life." "Your fingernails and your toenails?" cried the child. "Oh my, how funny!" "Hush, little granddaughter. I am afraid you have not been trained to respect the traditions of your ancestors. We have to save our nails and cut off baby hair so that our bodies may be perfect when we start on the long journey. The time cannot be far away," she said, gazing thoughtfully out into the garden. Chio had been peering curiously into the boxes, but now her face suddenly sobered and she drew a little closer to her grandmother. "My heart is troubled, honorable grandmother," she said. "I thought it would be a long, long time. You said you had always, even when you were a little girl, put perfume in the boxes to keep them nice and all ready for your death." Mother lovingly stroked the little black head with her wrinkled hands. "Yes, but it will not be so long now. I have finished my life work, and the merciful Buddha is preparing my platform of lotus blossoms, I am very sure." "Does the merciful Buddha want you to take your old clipped nails with you when you go to the lotus platform?" "No, he does not care about my body. He only cares for me." "Then why did you save your nails so carefully?" Mother glanced towards the closed shrine. "The holy shrine, little Chio, is only a box when it is empty," she said, "and my body is only a borrowed shrine in which I live. But it is a proper courtesy to leave a borrowed article in the best condition." Chio's eyes looked very deep and solemn for a moment. "That's why we have to take a bath every day and always keep our teeth clean. Dear me, I never thought of that as being polite to God." I had been so anxious over the children's shortcomings in etiquette and so happy over the slow but satisfactory outcome that I had never given thought to the changes which my years in America must have made in myself. One afternoon, coming back from a hurried errand, I was walking rapidly up the road towards home when I saw Mother standing in the gateway watching me, and I knew that she disapproved of my undignified haste, as indeed she should, for nothing is more ungraceful than a hurrying woman in Japanese dress. She'd met me with her usual bow, then she said with a gentle smile, "Etsuko, you are growing to be very like your honorable father." I laughed, but my cheeks were hot as I walked up the path beside her, accepting silently the needed reproof, for no Japanese woman likes to be told that her walk suggests that of a man. Occasional hints like this kept my manners from marching with my mind on the road to progress, and under the same quiet influence my two active American children gradually changed into two dignified Japanese girls. Within 2 years' time, we both spoke Japanese without accent, and we wore Japanese dress so well that to strangers they appeared to have lived always in Japan. Just to be at the same house with Mother is excellent training for a girl, I thought, congratulating myself that Hanano had adapted herself so well to her grandmother's standards. Selfishly busy with my daily duties and content that our home was so harmonious, I'd forgot that where duty lies between the old and the young, nature's law points direct to youth, and I was counting the gain only, but what of the loss? One day in the cherry blossom season, Hanano was sitting at her desk near mine when a light breeze touched the branches of a cherry tree near the porch, and some pale pink petals drifted across her desk. She picked one up and, after holding it a moment, pressed it gently between her fingers and then threw it aside and sat looking at the damp spot in her fingers. "What are you thinking, Hanano?" I asked. She looked up, startled, and then slowly turned away. "One time in America," she said after a moment, "when many people were at our house, I think it must have been an afternoon tea, I got tired and I went out on the lawn. I climbed to my castle. You remember the 7th limb of the big apple tree? The blossoms were just falling and a petal fell right into my hand. It left a wet spot just like this cherry petal did. Oh, Mama, wouldn't you give just everything to see Grandma again, and the porch and the trees and—" The little black head went down on the desk, but before I could reach it was up again, held high. "It's all right," she said. "I love Japan now, but there used to be times when my breast was just full of red-hot fire and I had to run fast. And once, when you were all away, I climbed the prickly pine by the porch just once, but I don't want to anymore. It's all right. I love it here." I remembered then how sometimes she'd scampered around and around the garden, her sleeves flying in the wind and her clogs clattering over the stepping stones, and I, ignorant and unsympathetic mother that I was, had taken her to my room and talked to her about being gentle and quiet. But that was a very long time before. Gradually she had learned to talk a little lower, to laugh a little less, to walk a bit more noiselessly on the matting, and to sit silent and attentive with a bowed head when her elders were speaking. Only the other day Mother had said, "Granddaughter shows great promise. She is growing gentle and graceful." And I sat and thought. I wondered if Hanano was ever really happy anymore. She never seemed sorrowful, but she had changed. Her eyes were soft, not bright, her mouth drooped slightly, and her bright, cheery way of speaking had slowed and softened. Gentle and graceful. Yes, but where was her quick readiness to spring up at my first word? Where was her joyous eagerness to learn to do? My little American girl, so full of vivid interest in life, was gone. With a feeling of helplessness, I looked over her desk and was comforted, for the touch of homesickness had passed away and she was studying busily. An hour later, when I went unexpectedly to her room, I saw her kneeling beside an open drawer where her American clothes were kept. She had pulled out her old serge suit and her face was buried in its folds. I crept away to the garden. I could not see, and I stumbled over a flower pot. It was a dwarf pine. The pushing roots had burst the pot and my touch had caused it to fall apart, disclosing the roots cramped together in a twisted knot. It's just like poor Hanano, I moaned. They will bind it again tomorrow, and neither it nor she will ever be free. End of part 14. If you are enjoying these audiobooks, you could really help this channel by subscribing. Please let your friends know that these stories are available also for their listening pleasure. Thank you.